You are listening to the Beltway Wars Invitational podcast with your hosts Adam Jackson and Patrick Wheelton. Enjoy the show.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast Week 5 edition with your wonderful hosts, Adam Jackson and Patrick Wheelton. We are doing this right before the Orioles get the set off for their win or out game here. So just to make sure that we get you the best fantasy football news that money can buy, as in we're not getting paid, we decided to do this a little early. So let's just get right into it. Pat, do you have anything to say about Week 5? You had a little interesting anecdote I wanted you to save before we started recording.
Let's say, but some more injuries again. You know, we're sort of back to the running back injury nightmare that we had early in the season, with a couple key guys going down, a couple guys that have been top fantasy performers at the running back position going down. So just add more to the tally of running backs that have missed games early in the first part of the year, and it's going to make some interesting roster configurations, especially now that we're into the bye week. So it's make it or break it time for some running backs.
And I say it's make it or break it time for a lot of teams in our league. And let's just get let's get started here with our two highest scoring teams in the league this week. That would be Mike and Alex. Alex, unfortunately, on the losing side of this with a very solid 142.64. But Mike puts out a dominant performance, a 162.16. Now going to 4-1 on the season, while Alex goes to 1-4 on the year. Looking at Mike's squad here, Josh Allen has a great game, 2 touchdowns, runs a touchdown in, really showing that he is that number one quarterback overall in fantasy, and he showed a lot of faith going with him more than some other quarterbacks. Travis Etienne over on the other side of the pond, 26 carries, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, and actually gets involved in the receiving game with 4 catches for 48 yards. Devon Achane keeps on doing his thing. 11 carries, 151 yards, and a touchdown with a fumble loss, but there's some injury news with that, so we'll get to that. Justin Jefferson, another one with some injury news, has a quiet game here, 3 for 6, 28 yards. DJ Moore on Thursday night against the Commanders, 8 for 10, 230 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Should have been 4 touchdowns if it wasn't for a inadvertent whistle that he was ruled out of bounds, which he wasn't out of bounds, so could have had an even bigger day. And last but not least, his new trade acquisition, Brian Robinson, 6 for 10, gets involved in the passing game, 33 yards. So not really a great debut for him, but didn't need him this week as he scored over 160 points.
He did, and it was the running backs again for this team. We've seen the breakout of Achane this season so far. It doesn't look like there's an update, but I guess there was some. I heard something. I guess was it Mike that texted us that said that Achane and Jefferson were both going to be on IR. Have either of them officially been placed on IR yet?
Jefferson has officially been placed on IR. They're not really sure about Achane right now, but it's definitely a multi-week injury. They're not sure if they're going to put him on IR or not. I don't know if there's an official word. We can click on him real quick just to see. 10 hours ago, it just says likely out multiple weeks. So they haven't made a decision yet, but it looks like that he's not going to have him. Just looking at the schedule here, Carolina, Philly, New England, KC, and then the bye. So you're probably thinking they're going to wait until after the bye days comes back if it's multi-weeks. That would make the most sense. So Mike might be out of his rookie phenom running back for 3 to 4 weeks here.
Yeah, not a lot behind him on the bench. Obviously, 2 guys who in previous seasons would be massive running back point scorers, but Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook have not done really anything for their respective teams. Both playing on very bad teams, the Patriots and the Jets, both very bad. So it'll be interesting to see what Mike does. At the very least, he's 4-1. He's currently number 2 in the league behind you. But he's got enough on this team to weather the storm. I think even though getting a 0 out of Hunter Henry may need a tight end, may look elsewhere to get some production. Henry started out the year with a couple solid games, but has started to disappear here, especially in week 5. So obviously the big story, in my opinion, on this team right now is DJ Moore. And talk about weathering the storm. If you can continue to get the production out of DJ Moore with these Bears who have been playing better, granted some easier matchups here in the past couple weeks. We'll have Minnesota next week. You like to think that that's another potentially high-powered team to have your offense play against. His target's gone up essentially every week. His snap percentage still, high 80s, 90s. He's the receiver that you want to have in this Bears offense, and he's getting a little bit more comfortable with Fields this season. So, 45 points, obviously a massive fantasy day, and it really carried him to a fourth victory.
I mean, just looking at his last 4 games here, 13, 11, 23, and 45, so definitely going in the right direction to maybe, I mean, this is kind of crazy to say with the Bears wide receiver, but maybe a top 15, maybe a top 20 play the rest of the season. Mike could definitely use that. The one positive here, I was looking at this while you were talking. If Achane's going to be out, you move him, you move Brian Robinson there. He does have Mike Thomas on the bench here. Now, nothing too crazy in numbers, but hasn't had under 5 targets in any of his games this year. So the touchdowns haven't been there, but the workload has been there. I think the lowest snap count is 71%, and that was last week when they jumped out to a huge lead. So game script was definitely there. 41st ranked receiver, but he has been getting opportunities. So that's a nice little bench player that he can insert to maybe weather the storm here with some injuries.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And his matchups recently have not been great. Talking about Michael Thomas. But if you look starting in week 7, so Houston next week, not easy, but starting in week 7, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Chicago, Minnesota. That is a cakewalk for the Saints and for Michael Thomas. So hopefully he'll continue to be involved. He has no fewer than 6 targets on the season, so it's not like he has disappeared really in any game.
Yeah.
Where
it's just the touchdowns haven't been there. That's just the main thing, and that can come at any time.
Yep, absolutely.
But just looking at this, the final thing on Michael Thomas, everyone talks about Chris Olave, 28% target share in that offense, which leads the team. So Derek Carr is definitely looking for him and looking for him early and often. So definitely a nice piece that you can slide in there for. He's not going to be Justin Jefferson, but maybe he can get you 10 points a week, and you'll be more than happy with that.
Yeah, at this pace, I mean, again, if 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, potentially when Achane and Jefferson, again, we don't know timetables for these guys yet, other than that Jefferson will miss at least 4. Mike is hoping and praying that he's probably going to be 500 by the time those guys get back. And if he is, then, you're looking at a playoff team, but definitely not to have that 4-1 record given the injuries that he's suffering.
It's very interesting. So, just the last thing on Mike's team, it could be one of those situations where he loses a couple games and slides down the standings. He gets in the playoffs, and he's that first-round team that you do not want to play with all these players coming back. So it's definitely something to watch out for Mike if he can continue to climb up the standings or at least tread water until some of these players come back. But let's go over to Alex's squad here. 142.64 made a late push to try to catch Mike, but it did not happen for him. Starts Jared Goff here. Great start, 20 of 28, 236, 3 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown on the day for 27 points. Josh Jacobs has a nice game on Monday night. 20 for 69, a touchdown. We've been talking about him a little bit, and he's definitely delivered. A little bit of a matchup problem that Alex had is T. Higgins did not start this game, and he was in the starting lineup. Guess he didn't see that. He might have been a late scratch for Sunday's game, but unfortunately, there got a 0 from there. George Pickens with the late touchdown catch against our Baltimore Ravens, 130 yards and a touchdown. George Kittle with a huge day against the Dallas defense, 3 for 4, 67 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the day. DeAndre Swift still doing well, 17 carries, 70 yards, still has a tight grip on that Philly running back position, 6 for 6, 38. You'd like to see that with Alex's squad. Alex is 1-4, but I feel like this team is very talented. Just looking at his squad, I mean, he started Jared Goff over Trevor Lawrence, so we said that last week, and it definitely paid off. I think it's just a little bit of some bad luck for Alex, who is now kind of quietly and kind of surprisingly 1-4 on the season.
Yeah, and he would have been really kicking himself had he lost by 13, 14 points, because either Josh Reynolds on the bench or Curtis Samuel even would have won him the week, but turns out no, 20-point victory. Neither of those guys would have got it done in the numbers that Alex needed. So you feel a little bit better at least that you, but still not great to start someone who is inactive. Nice signs of kind of upswings for guys like George Pickens here. We still know Deontay Johnson is yet to return, but Pickens has very quietly put together 2 really massive games this season, including this game against the Ravens, and is actually currently number 13. So basically, a low-end wide receiver 2 for you right now. Granted, coming over on those 2 big performances, but 10 targets for the second time this season. So a nice little kind of pick-me-up game for George Pickens. Same thing with George Kittle, the 2 Georges dominating fantasy points for Alex's team. Kittle has really been up and down the season, more down than up, but he does go for 3 touchdowns. He only caught 3 catches, and they were all good for touchdowns. So kind of it got the fantasy points in a funky way, but when you're playing fantasy football, you really don't care how you get the points.
Nope.
So 3 for 4. He was tight end 1 on the week and is up to tight end number 6 on the season, more in line with where you drafted him. Certainly, you hope that his floor is a little bit better than it has been, but a nice day certainly for Kittle in this week.
So I know that we've been talking about the Atlanta offense here, in terms of the quarterbacks. Who does better? With Taylor Heineke comes in for Desmond Ridder, is that better for the pass catchers in Atlanta? But I'm going to pose the same question to you about Bijan Robinson. Do you think that if Taylor Heineke is the starting quarterback there in Atlanta, do you think that's better for Bijan? Because, just looking at his numbers and where you drafted him, he's the 8th overall running back, so that's good. But, 14 for 46, 3.2 yards per carry, not great. Kind of saves the day with a receiving touchdown. But do you think that his value goes higher with the quarterback change, or do you think it stays the same?
I don't necessarily think so. I think actually, if anything, it might go down a slight bit. Heineke, to me, represents the possibility of at least a little bit more competent passing game for the Falcons. As it is, though, Robinson has not had 20 rushing attempts on the season. His high was 19. He's typically more in the 10 to 15 range. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It could be a situation where they know how talented he is. They know how much he means to the offense, that maybe they're just trying not to work him in his rookie season too much. They're trying to protect him a little bit. But down to 61% snap percentage on the year, so not great. I don't know that the quarterback difference, if they make that change, would matter too much. But you'd certainly like to get a little bit more out of him. He's the number 8 running back in fantasy right now, but drafted to be the number 3. So
Yeah.
Underperforming slightly, but you love when you watch him, you realize how great he is.
Yeah.
He made an incredible play for the touchdown this week. But you hope that as the season wears on, they'll start to lean on him even more and more.
It's just the Arthur Smith curse. He doesn't use his playmakers as much as he should. I don't think that just how talented he is, he shouldn't have less than 20 touches a game. So I don't really know where that's coming from, but it's definitely putting a cap on his ceiling going forward, as long as he's being used in that manner. let's go over to our next highest scorer here, and that would be our own Dustin Summers with 151.06 to Scott's 116.32. Looking at Dustin's team here, I think this is one of the teams where we have quarterback things. So Deshaun Watson was on a bye, so he starts Kirk Cousins. He has a fine game. He has 47 attempts, 284 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. He starts Jonathan Taylor here. Zach Moss looked like the better running back for the Colts, but he does get 6 carries, 18 yards. He was on a snap count as confirmed by Irsay before the game started. The real newsworthy story is Jamar Chase is finally back. 19 targets, 15 catches, 192 yards, and 3 touchdowns against Arizona. It looked like Burrow was just feeding him the ball and trying to keep him happy, and squeaky wheel gets the oil here. 44 points on the day. Puka Nacua still has a good game with Cooper Kupp coming back. 7 for 11, 71 yards, and a touchdown on the day. And we were just talking about it. Kyle Pitts, look at that. 7 for 11, 87 yards, 11 targets on the day. You'd love to see that as a Kyle Pitts owner. Marquise Brown, 4 for 10. Not a great efficiency there, but does get in the end zone. A very solid day for Dustin, who now goes 3-2 on the season.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been talking up his team a little bit in recent weeks. I still do like it. I think he was able to manage his team well while he waited for Jonathan Taylor and still gets yet another win here, even without a Taylor at 100%. He just gets 15% of the snaps. That will surely go up, although Zach Moss, you have to say, has been playing well in his absence. But we talk about this every week with Dustin's team, looking back at those early expenditures that he made in the waiver section. Kyren Williams, a little bit of an off day here. He's still one of the top backs in the league by points. He's still getting a decent amount of work. 13 for 53. Doesn't get into the end zone in this one, but still has been, holding down that running back position rather well for Dustin. And then, you mentioned Puka Nacua, who continues. The big question coming into this week, of course, was what is he going to do against his opponent on the other side here for Scott, Cooper Kupp. They put up similar point totals and similar target totals. They were both targeted, 11 for Nacua and 12 for Kupp, so very similar. Nacua got the touchdown, Kupp had the yardage. So that is a good sign for Nakua's value as a fantasy wide receiver for Dustin's team. You start to think, gosh, am I going to have to get him out of the lineup? Is he going to be the number 3 some of these games? Is Atwell going to still be relevant? But at least for now, Nacua still seems to be rosterable and playable in fantasy. You mentioned
and
Kyle Pitts.
Before you go any further, I will say that the Rams did trade Van Jefferson this afternoon, so that's one less target person. I know he wasn't really involved, but it frees up 4 or 5 targets a game for those two.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Van Jefferson now not a Ram. And then elsewhere on the receiver core, he gets Jalen Waddle, a nice 5 for 10, not a very efficient day, but 12 fantasy points, gets into the end zone for that Miami offense. He's been a little bit of an underperformer thus far on the season. Now with Achane potentially on the shelf, maybe they go to Waddle a little bit more. His snap percentage has gone up in each of the first 4 games that he's played. He missed week 3 with that injury. So positive signs for Jalen Waddle. Positive signs for Marquise Brown. I was a big naysayer on Brown. The reports coming out of camp were not good prior to the season, but he's now got 4 straight games of 13 or more fantasy points. In fact, he's basically 14 fantasy points a week, which in a half-point PPR league is great. His targets, he's had 10 targets in 3 of the last 4 weeks. So all of a sudden, Marquise Brown, you don't think of him as a model of consistency, but he has been the model of consistency thus far for Dustin's team. He's still able to put him in there at the flex position, get his double figures in points, and that's how Dustin has been able to run up some pretty gaudy point totals these last couple weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree. You weren't sure how that air attack was going to work in Arizona with Josh Dobbs out there, but it seems to be working just fine for Marquise Brown as he continues to be a model of consistency, like you said, for Dustin. Dustin now goes to 3-2, a great win, and will look to make some noise next week. But let's go over to Scott's team here. 116.32 now goes to 2-3 on the season. Just looking at a squad here, start Sam Howell over Russell Wilson, and that was the correct decision. Throws the ball 51 times in kind of a game script. I don't think they really want him throwing 51 times, but he does. Throws for 2 touchdowns, gets 1 2-point conversion there. Isaiah Pacheco gets in the end zone, 16 carries, 55 yards. You like to see that. Tony Pollard has a kind of disappointing day here against a tough San Francisco front. 6 carries, 29 yards, and a fumble lost. Cooper Kupp in his return, 8 for 12, 118 yards. DeAndre Hopkins has his best game of the season, 8 for 11, 140 yards. And Mark Andrews, 6 for 10, 65 yards, but could have been a much bigger day. He drops a touchdown against Pittsburgh in one of the 7 drops that the Ravens wide receivers / tight ends had this week. So could have been a bigger day for Mark Andrews, and Scott needed that if he wanted to even get closer to a victory against Dustin.
Yeah, and what he really needed was some touchdowns. I mean, the only touchdowns he got from running backs, wide receivers, or tight ends was the one single from Isaiah Pacheco. Otherwise, his players kept in check. You mentioned Pollard struggles for a second week in a row as the Dallas Cowboys absolutely got balled out against by the 49ers, who beat the Cowboys 42-10. Obviously, game script there means Pollard only 8 carries, did get a couple points from 4 or 5 through the air, also lost a fumble. So not a great day for your top running back on this team. Otherwise, I mean, just pretty mediocre to good. Hopkins continues. I think, is it Treylon Burks that's still hurt there or is now hurt, and Hopkins has maybe potentially some more opportunities coming his way. He's 8 for 11 in this one, 140 yards. Again, you need a couple of these guys to get into the end zone to boost these numbers up. Mark Andrews, same thing, 6 for 10, 65 yards. Nice day. You don't get the cherry on top with the touchdown. So just unfortunate stroke of luck. I mean, when your opponent puts up 151 points, it's going to be difficult no matter what. But I agree with you. Right decision in hindsight on starting Sam Howell. That's nice. He obviously looked at that Bears matchup and decided that it was worth exploiting, and Howell was able to do that with quantity over quality there for sure. But I look at this team, Scott's team now 2-3. I don't know how to feel about it moving forward. We talked in the past how we like Pacheco. He's getting the work for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking at these wide receivers here. Even with Kupp, though, I mean, Michael Pittman, you're starting to see in Indianapolis how Josh Downs, is it Josh Downs that destroyed the Ravens and has continued to have some fantasy relevance in the wide receiver core for that Colts team?
Yeah.
Hopkins, is he going to be able to still do enough? What do you think? I mean, at this point, right now, Scott's 2-3. Is this a playoff team in your eyes?
I think that it is a fringe playoff team. I will say that there's some good news here for Scott, I would say. One on Michael Pittman. I think that the passing offense as a whole is going to be better with Gardner Minshew back there instead of Anthony Richardson. I think he's just more of a consistent passer in terms of both their careers right now. So I think that with Gardner Minshew, I think that Pittman is slightly higher in terms of rankings each week. So with that, and DeAndre Hopkins, this is his best game of the season. I think he's finally starting to get comfortable in that with Ryan Tannehill in that Tennessee offense. Let's look at his schedule here. He hasn't scored a touchdown on the year. The touchdown's going to come. He plays Baltimore this week, then has a bye, then Atlanta, Pittsburgh. So kind of so matchups here, but they should be close in all those games. So they shouldn't be blowing out anybody. They should be behind in probably most of those matchups. So game script will definitely
be in a close game with Baltimore because the Baltimore can't seem to win a game by much of anything.
Well, that's true. But Hopkins, you'd like to see that it's finally a progression that's starting here. he had 13 targets the first week, 5, 7, 6, and back to 11. This is his best yardage of the year. I think better days ahead for Hopkins. My big concern is this flex spot here. It looks like he has Amari Cooper on the bench, so for the bye, so he's definitely going to be slotted in there in the slot for Gus Edwards. You can't trust Gus Edwards right now. They run the ball with way too many running backs there in Baltimore. He needs more than 12 carries to be effective, I would think. I think he's more of a rhythm running back. So, he's a okay bye week fill-in, but, he has Amari Cooper coming back, so that's definitely going to help. This team is talented, and I would not count them out yet. Definitely one of those teams that I think there's other teams you want to face in the first round of the playoffs than Scott's team. So I do think that he does get in, but I think it will be I think he's on the bubble, as the NCAA basketball term.
I would tend to agree. Just the last thing here that I noticed in terms of just a weird stat line. We talked before about Bijan Robinson's usage in that Atlanta offense. Tyler Algier on Scott's bench here, 17 carries this week. Yeah. That's his third time with 15 or more carries on the season. So kind of an interesting dynamic there. That's certainly the reason why Robinson's numbers and his snap count is not completely where we would expect it to be for such a talented what you would think would be a bell cow running back. Algier still getting carries in the Atlanta offense.
Isn't it funny, though, that Algier, he's getting all these carries, but you can't use him?
What? Yeah, I mean, you called it earlier with not just utilizing your star weapons. I mean, Kyle Pitts had a great game, but so did, I think, Jonnu Smith, right? I think they both. I think Jonnu Smith was the lead receiver, at least in, I think, receptions this week, if I'm not mistaken. So, totally a mystery. But if Atlanta wants to win, they won this game. So I guess you can't question them too much.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I feel like you can't use Tyler Algier because I feel like that 6 carry, 26-yard game is coming. You just don't know when it's going to happen. So definitely a tough spot for Scott there. Let's go to our next matchup. I guess it's going to be me versus Tom here. One of the weirder matchups of this week. A lot of things happening on each side of the ball. But I go to 5-0 on the season, 125.72 to 123.74. The closest matchup of this weekend. Starting with my squad here, Anthony Richardson goes out of this game in the second quarter and only scores 4.42 points and is carried by the rest of the squad here. Alvin Kamara has been great since he's come off the suspension list. 22 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown, 3 for 3 for 17 yards. Tyreek Hill continues to just torch defenses, 8 for 9, 181 yards, and a touchdown. Zay Jones coming back from injury and then getting re-injured. 3 for 5, 23 yards, does get in the end zone there. And Raheem Mostert, 10 carries, 65 yards, and a touchdown on the day. With Achane being out for a couple weeks, his value is skyrocketing right now. And then finally, the defense that I picked up this week was New Orleans, and that really carried the day for me. 26 total points for my defense here. 5-0, obviously I feel great about that, but I do have a lot of question marks going forward with some injuries and some bye weeks and some underperformers. So it will be interesting what I do in week 6.
Yeah, I noticed midweek the $10 spend on the New Orleans Saints, and I sort of looked at that. I said, boy, that seems like overpaying. Not a lot of people were paying attention to the midweek, mid to late week waiver pickup. So maybe you would have got him. I guess nobody else put in a bid, right? You could have got him for dollars, but regardless, you're not going to complain after 26 fantasy points from the Saints that end up getting you.
And I can explain my reasoning why I did that.
If you'd like.
Though the Saints are going to be my starting defense for many, many weeks to come. So it's I don't have to stream anymore. They're a very good defense, so I'm definitely going to be starting them week in and week out. They're more valuable to me than just a spot start, so that's why I spent money.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And tell me this. What I do want to hear the story on here is, obviously I know why you did it and what happened. I don't know the order that things happened here, but
sure.
You end up starting a guy who I didn't know his name before this week, Calvin Austin, a Steelers wide receiver against the Ravens this week. Obviously, buys and injuries for wide receivers forced you into making that decision. I don't know if that was a last minute, you're waiting for a 4 o'clock game and somebody's out and you had to pick somebody up and that was the best option you had. I figure that's probably something like what happened.
Yeah. So I had Mike Evans on bye, Deontay Johnson, who's still on IR. Amon-Ra St. Brown was kind of a late scratch, and Joshua Palmer was also on bye. So basically, what I was trying to do is just try to find one guy that might hit a home run. That's a fast guy that just might get like a 60-yard bomb. Obviously, he was only targeted once, so it didn't work out. But yeah, there was kind of slim pickings there in terms of the wide receiver market on the free agent side. I was going to be really in trouble if Zay Jones didn't play. Luckily, he did, and was actually somewhat productive. So that worked out for me for this week.
Yeah, well, nice to be 5-0.
This to be 5-0.
Sure, and you've got guys coming back. You're gonna have Deontay Johnson back. You're gonna have Amon-Ra St. Brown back. You're gonna have Dak Prescott in the lineup unless you make a move at the quarterback position. How do you
Yeah.
feel? Richardson, it's a shoulder. He's gonna miss at least the next week. Probably a shoulder for a quarterback. You got to think it could be a 3 to 4 week at least potential injury for the Colts. So Dak, I don't know how much confidence you can have in him after this past week. So I have a feeling you're probably going to need to make a move at some point at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm probably going to make a move here. Looking at his next three, week 7, he's on bye, so I will need to be making a quarterback move. Week 6, actually kind of do like the matchup against the Chargers, so should be a shootout game. You'll probably be starting there. But yeah, definitely something I need to look at going forward because Dak is not the answer. There were some talks about them trying to go to Trey Lance, which would have been insane. But
Yeah.
that's kind of where it is now in Dallas in terms of the quarterback market.
Quarterback 21 on the year, has not had his bye yet, and just one game over 15 fantasy points. So struggle fest for Dallas.
Yep. But going over to Tom's team here, Lamar Jackson seems to always struggle against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Has no touchdowns on the day, has an interception and a fumble lost. Yeah, always seems to really struggle against the Steelers for whatever reason. Dave Montgomery has a nice day with Gibbs out, 19 carries, 109 yards, and a touchdown. He's probably the most underrated running back from the preseason. He is now running back 7 on the year with missing a game. So he has been the unsung hero in terms of running backs that were drafted late. Alexander Madison has an okay day, saves the day with a touchdown. Stephon Diggs has a huge day, 8 for 11, 121 yards, and a touchdown. Logan Thomas, who he actually started over Darren Waller, so kind of an interesting mark there, but pays off 9 for 11, 77 yards, and a touchdown on the day. The two that are kind of surprising based on plus matchups were Devontae Adams in his revenge game, only goes 45 yards on the day, and Zay Jones gets the targets, but had a couple bad drops, and he fell once he could have had a much bigger day, and only 73 yards. Tom is now 3-2. He's pretty high on the points scored list. Don't think there's much to worry about for Tom. I think this is just kind of an unfortunate week.
Yeah, I think so. Although kind of Montgomery and Madison are running backs that are sort of going in the opposite direction. You've talked before about how Montgomery has solidified his lock on that running back job. Madison, after the trade of Akers a couple weeks ago, he's running okay, but still just not a lot of work. He was game scripted out a lot, but had his lowest snap percentage on the year. Again, game script probably dependent to some degree, although it was a close game against Kansas City. So you just have to wonder, is Akers going to continue as he gets more comfortable in that offense to eat into that? He may be trending a little bit more toward a flex than a running back too.
Yeah.
And Scott, I don't think has really too much. Dameon Pierce is kind of in the same boat, although there's no one there that's threatening too much workload. But from a pure workload percentage, I mean, he hasn't hit 60% of snaps on the season. Even though he's getting the carries, he's just not doing very much. He has not hit 3.5 yards per carry on the year. So just these guys continue to be kind of mediocre. They're doing it with workload. in terms of carries. A guy like Pierce, 20 carries, but just 66 yards. So you kind of just look at this running back position. You were hoping to get more out of them. You're
Yeah.
really grateful that Montgomery is working out. Otherwise, this running back room would be in shambles.
Just a little bit on Pierce here. 59% snap count. It just seems like he's in the running plays only, and that they don't really trust him in the passing down situations for whatever reason. I mean, hasn't gone over 3 targets in any of these games. They're throwing the ball a ton. You would think that Stroud would try to find him out of the backfield. It just seems like they don't like him in terms of, in third down plays, pass pro protection. So it looks like he's just, the first and second down back, which can be productive, but hasn't gone over 4 yards per carry this season. So definitely been a little bit of a struggle. I know they have offensive line struggles there in Houston, and CJ Stroud has looked good, so that kind of puts a cap on his ceiling. The draft capital that you spent on him, you're hoping for a little more. He was picked in the 4th round by Tom. So I do like this team though. I do believe that they're better days ahead. I think it was just an unlucky week.
Yeah, and could have easily gotten a victory if Zay Flowers would have caught a couple of those balls that he dropped or tripped on. He's got the stick here with Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers. So really, anything more from Flowers would have gotten the job done there for Tom. But he's 3-2. I agree with you. There's a lot of talent on this team. There's not too many injury concerns on this team yet. I hope that doesn't curse him. Other than Tank Dell, who we should mention, promising rookie wide receiver for the Texans, has had a couple flashy games so far this season. He was ruled out in this game and is in concussion protocol, but otherwise pretty healthy. Great idea to sit those Cowboys, the Cowboys defense here. We should talk about this because the Cowboys have been week winners for Tom twice this year, and they have a tough matchup here. They give up 42 points to San Francisco. He instead starts the Jets, who hold the Broncos to 21 points and collect some sacks and some fumbles on the way. So a good decision there. It's hard to sit that Cowboys defense, but Tom made the right call.
Definitely, 100% there. Very savvy move, picking up a second defense to get the most points possible for Tom. Going to our next matchup here. What is it? I think it's going to be your matchup here. Sarah defeated you to go 3-2, 122.36 to 78.42. Not a great showing for you this week, but let's start with Sarah here. Justin Fields, of course, figures it out against you. 15 for 29, 282, 4 touchdowns. He actually leads, I think he leads the NFL in passing touchdowns, which is kind of crazy to think about. So 32 points there. Starts Devin Singletary, gets a big fat 0 there. A.J. Dillon finally has his breakout game, 20 carries, 76 yards, and a touchdown with Aaron Jones on the injured list. A.J. Brown has 127 yards. Drake London, 6 for 9, 78 yards. KJ Osborne, who's probably going to see a much bigger share of the passing offense with Justin Jefferson out, so something to watch out there for Sarah. 5 for 9, 49 yards. And I think the most unsung hero here for Sarah's team is Sam Laporta. 3 for 4, 47 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is literally rewriting the book on rookie tight ends, now the number 1 overall tight end in fantasy football.
Yeah, just 3 for 4 for Laporta, but unfortunately for me, 2 of those go into the end zone. Very Kittle-like in his efficiency, touchdown-wise. And I'll cop to this, and I gave Sarah a lot of credit last week, and I fully still believe that she has made the right moves this season to keep her team in contention. And in fact, I think potentially, with Justin Jefferson going down, you see KJ Osborne, who in a lot of leagues this week is going to be a big waiver pickup as one of the top available wide receivers. Well, he's not available in this league because Sarah was wise enough to recognize that the Vikings offense is dangerous and that he could potentially become even more relevant. He will become more relevant now. Yep. He will be the number 2 for the Vikings. So, Sarah kind of recovering from some injuries and some buys early in the year, and she's able to kind of find guys, and she's still winning. She's 3-2 now. And full disclosure, when I was making my trade of Brian Robinson for DK Metcalf, I highlighted the fact that, I could potentially sacrifice a running back this week, and that my opponent had some bye week issues, and I could stomach having DK Metcalf on bye while I, kind of wait for the future weeks. And how wrong I was. Not only am I in more running back trouble now than I was then, but Sarah is able to overcome the bye weeks. Even though she gets the 0 out of Singletary, she had Jerome Ford and Kenneth Walker, two starting running backs, on bye. Chris Godwin on bye, David Njoku on bye. So to be able to get that win, this is a pivotal. If Sarah makes the playoffs, we're going to look back at this week and say, this was the week that Sarah really helped herself in the biggest way. She made good decisions here.
Yeah.
She gets a big performance out of Fields despite some early season struggles, and really comes out of this one looking pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. These are the type of matchups you're kind of looking at. You're like, okay, well, I got like all my good players on bye. If you can squeak out a win, which he did, with some backup players, AJ Dillon, is very fortunate that Aaron Jones was out, and KJ Osborne puts up good numbers, and Drake London does as well. Those two might not be starting if there's not all these players on bye. To score 122 points is very impressive. So definitely good on her for maximizing her point totals and picking the right matchups for her squad.
By the way, matchups for Justin Fields looking forward: Minnesota, Las Vegas, and the Chargers. So 3+ matchups, teams that you can definitely throw on. Fields has dealt well with Denver and Washington, so a good part of the schedule for the Bears. Fields looks poised to continue his dominance. I totally did not realize that he had the most touchdowns. That's amazing. 4 in each of the last 2 weeks, and had one in each of the first 3. So 9, 10, 11 on the year. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean, as much crap as people have been giving Justin Fields, he's the 3rd-ranked quarterback in fantasy football now, with 2 outstanding weeks back to back. But going over to your squad here, obviously 78 points, not what you're looking for here, and it kind of came down to your running backs here. Matt Breida filling in for Saquon Barkley, only gets 21 yards. This is kind of why he's the backup. He's not that impressive of a running back. James Conner goes out of this game 6 for 46, no touchdowns there. CeeDee Lamb 4 for 5, 49 yards. They weren't even looking his way, which is kind of interesting to me. Calvin Ridley, though, does have a good game here over in London. 7 for 8, 122 yards. It seemed that Lawrence was looking for him early and often. You had to start Musgrave because was Aaron Jones a late scratch? So, I mean, 6 for 7, 34 yards. That's not horrible for a tight end. I mean, got 7 targets. So, definitely not what you wanted. You'd rather want Aaron Jones playing there. But you might have found something there with Luke Musgrave and, TJ Hawkins. You have viable tight ends, which a lot of teams don't even have one viable tight end. So, you might have something there for the tight end market, but you do have DK Metcalf coming back. I'm pretty sure Aaron Jones going to be back next week? I mean, are we even sure?
He's on bye.
Okay, so he's on bye, so he should be back the week after that. Saquon's kind of up in the air. You got some problems, but I don't know. I'm going to ask what you think. Do you think you can weather the storm here? You're still 3-2, so still positive record here. How are you feeling?
At this point, it's managing through the injuries, and obviously the injuries to Jones and Barkley have persisted longer than I would have hoped. Thought both of those guys were on the brink of returning. They still may be. They didn't this week, so that's why I was comfortable in trading Brian Robinson this past week, but it certainly hasn't panned out that way. Jones is concerning only because he did play last week, and so he presumably has regressed. Now, part of that is probably because they had the bye coming up next week, that he was inactive for this one. But yeah, totally injuries. Barkley unsure for next week, still up in the air, his status. Jones obviously will be inactive, or I'm sorry, they'll be on a bye. Roschon Johnson, one of my potential backups, is in the concussion protocol. And James Conner has been placed on IR. So just complete running back devastation for me at this point in time. Still have Jalen Warren. He may get a spot starter too if I absolutely need him. He has been better, and certainly better than Najee Harris. I think he's looked more explosive. He's more involved in the passing game. So he potentially may have to get a spot start for this team. In terms of CeeDee Lamb, not too worried. I think the squeaky wheel, again, we talked about it earlier, could get the grease here next week. Lamb, just, I think he's making some noise and not happy that he seems to be getting open. So I think a Jamar Chase like bounce back hopefully is in store for Lamb at some point soon.
And like we
And
said,
then
you do play the Chargers next week, which I do believe could be a shootout. So I'm definitely going to need to throw the ball, and he's probably going to be the beneficiary to that.
very true, very true. Other than that, I mean, Tua Tagovailoa, 16 fantasy points, a down week for him. Still confident that
Yeah,
he, for where I was able to get him in the draft, still confident that he's
yeah.
going to.
I'm not worried about any of the Dolphins, to be honest, except the ones that are injured. But just a kind of a down week for him. But the number 5 quarterback, and you drafted him where, like 8th round, probably.
Eighth and ninth, I think.
Yeah, so like that's all peaches right there for you at the quarterback position. But let's go to our next matchup here, and one where we have a team with their first win on the season, and that would be Brian Morgan, Timonium Thundercats 108.22 to 80.14. Now 1-4 on the season. Looking at his squad, Jalen Hurts has a nice day here, throws a touchdown, runs for 72 yards on 15 carries. That's kind of wild for a touchdown there. Brees Hall with the shackles finally off him, 22 carries, 177 yards, and a touchdown against Denver. Look on the board. Travis Kelce leaves this game, but then also comes back, 10 for 11, 67 yards, and a touchdown on the day. And nothing really much too else. Khalil Herbert got hurt on this game. Devontae Smith only had 1 catch on the day. Terry McLaurin did not look great against a plus matchup. And Robinson here for the Giants also went out. So gets 108. Luckily was playing a team that did even worse than him this week and gets his first win on the season.
Yeah, and Brian needed a break. He's still by a fairly healthy margin of like 20 points, has the most points against of anybody in the league. So that certainly does not help the situation. Though Josh's 80 points certainly helped him to get a win here, just despite the sort of 108 point performance, which is typically more times than not, I think not going to win you
No.
weeks. Brees Hall, obviously good to see. It's been kind of a weird season for him. His workload, his usage in the offense has been up and down and up and down. He plays more than 50% of the snaps for the first time on the season. Granted, it was against a Broncos offense that you could exploit a little bit, but he does go 8 yards a carry, 177 yards on the day, so a big total there. And he's rewarded with Philadelphia next week, so not great for Brees Hall next week in terms of matchup. Khalil Herbert, did you mention, leaves this game? I think has a high ankle sprain, so high ankles are harder to come back from than low ankles, so there's a good chance that he will miss some time for sure. So a tough blow at a position that I think he's already struggling a little bit with. Who got injured for Brian early in the season? He had a big injury, didn't he? It was
Mm.
maybe not. Well, I guess
Sarah,
Javante.
Sarah was Chubb. I know that.
Right. Maybe not. It was more that Brian waited till the 4th round to take Brees Hall as his first running back, has struggled with depth behind him.
Yeah.
Javante Williams missed this game. Don't exactly know the status. He's got a quad injury. It seemed like he practiced in full, so potentially he should be back. But the question now is he going to return back to the starting role? Emil McLaughlin, followed up his first performance with a decent second performance here this past week. So, and Samaje Perine is still around, and I think led the team in receptions. Did I could have that wrong,
No idea. Well, I can check.
but was more involved than typically, I think. But
Mm.
so what is going to be the role for Javante Williams when he's back this week? we shall see. But definitely still question marks for Brian. Nice to get the first win. Nice to get the big days out of Hall and Hurts, but still, I don't know, looking bleak in terms of roster construction.
Yeah, I mean, looking at his running back problems, I mean, he has Brock Purdy on the bench, who's an efficiency monster. He has Jalen Hurts. We know that quarterbacks aren't as valuable as running backs, but I mean, do you trade Purdy to a quarterback need just for like a flyer? I mean, just for my this is gonna sound crazy, but like a Tyler Algiers, someone that's at least that's not in the best situation, but is at least getting like carries. Just someone that you can just throw in your flex spot, or maybe when buys are coming up. I mean, you're not getting any value out of him sitting on the bench. So
I mean, potentially, yeah. I mean, I would say so. I mean, he's at the point where if Hurts got hurt, his season's probably. I mean, season's already going in the wrong direction fairly quickly, and if Hurts goes, that would be the nail in the coffin. So you may as well. I mean, if somebody is quarterback needy, Adam, and could use an arm, that could be something.
give me a call,
Adam,
Brian.
saw that from a mile away. Adam was putting that feeler out there. I could tell.
I mean, Brian, we can talk. I mean, you need some wide receiver help too, and I got plenty of wide receivers too. So go ahead and give me a call. We be able to work something out.
By the way, we and I want your feedback on this because we didn't talk about it and I didn't ask. But so I make the first trade of the season last week. Brian Robinson goes to Mike Kranz for DK Metcalf, who was on bye. Metcalf will rotate in and probably be the flex starter for me. What do you make of that trade when you saw it? What do you think about that deal?
It's weird because that Seattle offense is hard to figure out. Are they a run first team? Or they have two talented wide receivers? How much is the usage? They've shown in the past that they both can be very. They can share wide receivers room between Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. It looks like Brian Robinson has finally distanced himself from Antonio Gibson, so that brings a little more value to them. But if I had to guess, and no bias here, I think I would rather have DK Metcalf. I think that his ceiling's a little higher. I think that he can have those blow up games where he scores 30 points and he just bullies the opposing quarterback. Geno Smith just throws it up in the air and he comes down with 3 touchdowns. So I kind of like that his upside a little more, but running backs are very valuable, as you found out this week. So I would say it was definitely a fair trade. I would just say I probably like DK Metcalf a little more, just in terms of he has an established quarterback, and he's a physical specimen. I just feel like he can blow up more than Brian Robinson can.
Fair.
So that's what I got with that. Now going over to Josh's squad here. Starts Joshua Dobbs. He did not make the final cut for his roster as he was dropped today. Only scores 8 points on the day. Goes with the double Carolina running back situation, and that was a mistake with Miles Sanders scoring 1.2 points, who I don't know if you remember I said I did not like Miles Sanders after the draft. And Chua Hubbard, 9 carries for 35 yards. Nothing doing there for his first 2 starting running backs. The other Carolina player that actually has been doing well, 11 for 13, 107 yards, Adam Thielen, and a touchdown on the day. Not much else going here. Evan Ingram, 28 yards. Brandon Ayuk, 58 yards, and a 42-10 game. You expect them to have a lot more. The lone really bright spot was Thielen and the San Francisco defense, only allowing 197 yards and 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 3 interceptions on the day. Did have a little bit of bye week problems and a little bit of injuries. Austin Eckler, Geno Smith. He actually has 3 quarterbacks here. Joe Burrow kind of goes off, so that's good to see for him. Tyler Lockett also on bye as well. So not a great week for Josh here, but he can take solace in the fact that a lot of his main contributors were either hurt or on bye.
Yeah. We've talked a lot. Theme of this show seems to be running back hell for some fantasy teams. Yeah. Josh is squarely in one of the circles of hell.
I think he's in the 9th circle. I think he's in the lowest circle that we've seen so far in terms of this week.
We're going to need Dante's in. We're going to need a chapter in Dante's Inferno for the hell that Josh is in right now, having to start both Carolina backs. the worst NFL team right now. Starting both of those guys with Eckler on bye and coming off of an injury. You hope he's back, by the way, next week. If not, it's going to be more of this, which this is not good enough by any stretch of the imagination. Not only are they on the worst team, but they split snaps about evenly. Hubbard at 48 and Sanders at 46. So totally unusable. Hubbard actually outperformed. I guess their yards per carry were very, very similar. Miles Sanders lost a fumble. So if
Yeah.
you're Josh, that really sucks because you're hoping that one of these guys at least will distance themselves. Hubbard was actually kind of effective in some previous work, either last year or the year before. Was it when he was filling in for McCaffrey when he was still a Panther? I think he came in and had some decent games. So just not a good situation for Josh here. You mentioned Dobbs, not good. Geno Smith will be returning next week, but has Joe Burrow down there all of a sudden probably startable again, I would say, for Burrow after that
I'm
performance.
interested to see what his next three are for Burrow. He has Seattle next week, and then he has a bye, then he has San Fran and Buffalo. So
Ooh,
Buffalo and
yeah.
San Fran not great. He does have Seattle at home, but I'm probably starting. Well, I'll bring it to you. Are you starting Geno Smith at Cincinnati, or are you starting Joe Burrow against Seahawks?
I think it's got to be Burrow. I would feel worse if I sat Burrow and he, you know,
Popped off.
did this. And yeah, I think you'd have to go back to Burrow at this point. But it's a question. Like I had to think about it for a split second at least.
Right.
Um, the other big storyline here, and you kind of glanced on it, but Adam Thielen, my goodness, like quietly under the, he's always been kind of quietly under the radar back when he was a Viking, and now he's with the Panthers, and it's more of the same. He is just dominating.
He's so quiet. He's on a different planet, but he's doing fine. I mean, the 10th ranked wide receiver in fantasy this year.
As ranked,
That's a bar trivia question that no one will ever get right.
for sure. I mean, his targets go 2, 9, 14, 8, and 13. So he's heavily, heavily involved in an offense that frankly should only get better with a rookie quarterback who there's nowhere to go but up for that team at this point.
Yep.
Thielen has been a big part of the game plan. He's playing on just about every snap.
And he's the security blanket for Bryce Young. I mean, he's the only established wide receiver they have. So
Yep.
who else is he going to throw to?
I'll ask you, just in a vacuum, if you were redrafting today, where is Adam Thielen going?
Okay, well, let's see where he went.
Yeah, that's what
When the 10th round.
10th round. Yep,
Is he a 6th round pick?
at least. I mean,
who won the? You probably had the draft board up. Who won the 6th round?
6th round, you're talking about guys.
Who was the wide receivers? Yeah.
Like Jerry Jeudy. I like him over Jeudy.
Yeah, you like him over
Brandon
Judy?
And Ayuk, Mike Evans. Maybe that feels like probably the right range.
That feels right. Yeah.
Yeah. Chris
I mean, you love
Godwin.
him over Jared Judy right now.
Yep. But then you look in round 5. Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, you like to have Lockett.
I think that's the point right there. Terry McLaurin or Adam Thielen.
Yep.
I
I
mean
mean Drake London or Adam Thielen.
yeah, that's true. That's a no brainer, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
So maybe 5th round probably.
Yeah, great. One of the I think him and Dave Montgomery were the two most undervalued pick that's turned out to be, really good for their respective squads.
Yep. For sure.
Okay, so let's go over to our last matchup here, and it was our lowest scoring matchup of Week 5. It's Charlie going to 2-3 against our league low this week. A new shotgun video on the way for Jake here, 63.78 to 99.14. Charlie goes to 2-3 on the season, and Jake goes to 1-4 on the year. Looking at Charlie's squad here, Patrick Mahomes in a very plus matchup on Matthew Berry's love list this week. Has kind of a day here. 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry kind of being disappointing this year. 15th ranked running back overall, but where he was being drafted, you expect him to be in the top 10 at least. only 7.7 points on the day. James Cook continues to just be kind of like a 16th ranked, but 5 attempts for -4 yards. You do not like to see that. Deebo Samuel has an okay game here. 5 carries, 30 yards, and 3 for 3 for 55 through the air. But I think the biggest story here is Jordan Addison. Now with Justin Jefferson out, he has a good game here. 6 for 9, 64 yards, and a touchdown. I think his stock goes way up as he's probably now the number 1 wide receiver in a pass-happy offense. So as we don't like for players to get injured, I think Charlie is secretly a little happy that Justin Jefferson is going to be out for the next 4 weeks. And Jacoby Myers on Monday night, 7 for 10, 75 yards. Devontae Adams did not have a good game, but Jacoby Myers made up for it there. Has a touchdown, 17 points on the day. Charlie's now 2-3. We've been saying it all show. Anytime you can win a game and score 100 points on the day, you take it and you just kind of move on to the next week and you take your win.
Yeah, we just talked about Thielen and Montgomery as surprise kind of comeback out of the blue fantasy zombie kind of type guys. Jacoby Myers also quietly playing really well. I mean, he missed his week 2, but other than that, he's got a 12 fantasy point game, a 17-point fantasy game, and a 24-point fantasy game. Targets in 3 or 4 games, he's 10 or more. So clearly, he's got something going with Jimmy Garoppolo. Myers is a guy that I've always generally liked when he was a Patriot. I thought he was criminally underused in that offensive scheme. I don't know. Does he date back with the Patriots to when Garoppolo
was just looking at that, and I don't think so. It's been a long time that Jimmy Garoppolo has been on the Patriots.
Yeah, maybe.
And Jacoby Myers is only 26 years old. It's been more than 4 years. He's only has 4 years experience, so I would say no there. But it's just kind of interesting that Patriot Way is kind of transferring over to Oakland there. Or not, oh my God, Las Vegas, not Oakland.
How much would the Patriots like to have both of those guys right now? I mean,
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
one of the worst teams.
But Jacoby Myers, like as you were saying, I think it's one of those weird things that are like, Devontae Adams is getting double coverage, getting safety help over the top, and it's really opening things up for Jacoby Myers. I mean, 10 targets, 12 targets, 10 targets. He does have the weird game in week 4, only 4, but consistently getting 10 targets. I mean, you'd love to see that out of, what is he? Your 3rd wide receiver here? He has Keenan Allen on the bench here. 3rd wide receiver, I would say. 4th, maybe, with Jordan Addison going way up now with Justin Jefferson out. You'd like to see that for Charlie going forward.
Yeah, lock him into the flex. You're totally right on Addison, and Addison had been pretty good, aside from the random goose egg last week, which kind of skews his numbers. Other than that, I mean, he's been pretty good. He's got 3 touchdowns now on the season, and that's with Justin Jefferson. So good matchup against the Bears next week, and then San Francisco, tough on defense, but it can exploit the back. The secondary for San Francisco a little bit more than you can exploit the front group there for the 49ers. So potentially some big games ahead in filling in for Justin Jefferson. I like Addison a lot. So Charlie's got some momentum here to build from.
Yeah, so going over to our losing side here, 63.78, a really rough week for Jake here. Starts Jordan Love, has a horrible game, 3 interceptions on the day, and a plus matchup against Las Vegas. Christian McCaffrey, he has 13 points, but a down day for Christian McCaffrey, only 51 yards and a touchdown, doesn't get multiple touchdowns on the day. Najee Harris, we've been talking about him all year. Very underwhelming. 14 carries, 37 yards. Only gets 1 reception on the day. Chris Olave gets in the end zone, but only has 12 yards through the air there. Romeo Dobbs, 1 for 4. You hate to see that. Odell Beckham, not impressive at all. Cole Kmet, I remember Jake was cussing him out a couple weeks ago. Does start him here and does get 12 points on the day. Out of the tight end position, Cole Kmet is now the number 3 tight end in fantasy football. But looking on his bench, the most glaring thing is Zach Moss. My goodness. With all the news of Jonathan Taylor coming back, 23 carries, 165 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I'm going to bring a little question to you. The Colts play Jacksonville next week. Looking at Jake's roster construction here, do you start him at the flex?
Yes, I think you have to until you see otherwise, especially given the fact that the
Or
Patriots.
even not even the flex, maybe starting for Najee Harris, I think is the better question.
Well, Najee will be on bye, so
Okay.
he definitely will be in the lineup, I think. I mean, I don't think there's too many other options.
He also has
McLaughlin,
McLaughlin as well. Yeah.
yeah, McLaughlin, the other running back on the bench here, 16 fantasy points on 9 carries, used in the passing game, does get into the end zone through the air. So a nice game here. We talked earlier about that Broncos backfield. What is it going to look like? Is it going to be a three-headed monster? They've not looked very explosive. McLaughlin, at least in his kind of game plus of work, has looked explosive, which they have lacked on the season. Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine have not looked effective, not looked explosive. So at
Out
least
out of
there's some,
the out of the juggernaut college of Youngstown State University.
yeah, hey, sometimes
I should have looked up their mascot. I could have gone go Cougars or the hell their mascot is. But yeah, definitely an impressive and only 33% snap count. So doing the most with his opportunities, 7.5 yards per carry and 10 yards per carry in his first action last week. So definitely doing work with his opportunities.
yeah, I mean, from the receiver perspective here, just continues to struggle at the position. Doesn't get a lot of production. In fact, like what is that? Under 12 points for the three wide receivers that started, and then Judy with just 8 in the flex spot. Olave just continues to not. I mean, you talked earlier about how much you like Michael Thomas. Olave does have 3 10-plus target games, but in each of the last 2 weeks, he's down to 6 and 5. Um, Not very effective. Only has the one touchdown that he got this week. That's his only one on the year. So wide receiver 32, kind of a middling guy where as you draft him to certainly be better than he is, he was a second round pick. So just not getting the type of value that you would expect. And then a down game for McCaffrey just adds insult to injury. 12 fantasy points for most players, at the running back position. You think, okay, mediocre day. McCaffrey, especially in light of 42 points for the Niners, not sure if they reduced his workload toward the end of the game at all because of the lead, but does lose a fumble in this one. So just 12 fantasy points for your elite number one running back. So question
Yeah.
marks moving forward for sure for this team. Um, yeah, it's unfortunate for Jake.
He definitely needs a wide receiver too. I would say that's off this roster. I think that he needs to start making calls for trades. You should be pretty happy with Chris Olave, Christian Watson, and then whoever you can get in terms. You're looking at the Chris Godwin range. That's the kind of player that you need in terms of wide receivers here. You can't keep throwing out Beckham. The Baltimore offense is just way too spread out. I don't know how many big games you're going to get out of Dobbs anymore now with Watson back. So Judy's still kind of he's still trying to figure it out. He's 86% on the field, so you like to see that. But definitely need a more solid pass catcher. I think that's more of a concern than the running back position right now for Jake. So I would expect maybe some people hearing some calls about some wide receivers for Jake going forward.
Yeah, and kind of missed a sell high window on Jordan Love. Again, trading quarterbacks away is tough because
Yeah.
not many teams typically need them. But after 3 weeks, he was, one of the, I think he was like quarterback 4 in the league. He was playing really well, and he's really kind of regressed. Really terrible efficiency in the loss to the Raiders on Monday Night Football. So missed a potential window to deal him when he was hot. Um,
I will say with Jordan Love though, he does. Yeah, after the bye this week, he has Denver and Minnesota, so 2+ matchups that maybe his value will go back up, and maybe Jake can squeak him by for a quarterback needy team.
for sure, for sure. And then just to close this one out, just a
Sure.
little story time here. So Jake and I text a lot about fantasy. We're in another league together, and he texted me before the Monday night game asking me, if who he should start, whether it be Christian Watson or Romeo Dobbs, the two Packers receivers. He needed to pick one for Monday Night Football. I'm in that position in the other league that I'm in with him, where I needed to start one at my flex position. And I went with Dobbs in my other league, and I told Jake, hey, Dobbs has been better. I think I need to see it first from Watson before I'm able to trust him fully. Dobbs has has had some really good games on the season, including last week where he outperformed Watson. So Jake makes the decision to agree with me there on Dobbs, gets the start. And had he gone with Watson, he would not be shotgunning a beer. I would be. So I gave him my honest opinion. There's no trickery here. I don't want any fantasy karma to come back at me for this. And I have proof of my other matchup where I went with Dobbs over Watson in a PPR.
Maybe you'll pour one out for Jake just in solidarity this weekend.
Probably should. That's actually not a bad idea. That is not a bad idea. And I did talk to Jake. Jake is not a big shotgunner of beers. I'm not either,
Well, I
frankly.
mean, did you see Charlie's video? I mean, the bar is pretty low. The bar
Right.
is low.
Um, so I don't know. We may be getting a shotgun. We may be getting a shot. We may be getting something.
Just chug a beer. It's fine.
Uh,
That's fine. You don't need a
we'll get
shotgun.
from Jake. We'll get something from Jake. I
Okay.
mean, at 1-4, with given the way that his Packers played the other day, I think I might chug a couple beers.
Yeah, it's true. It might just be involuntary. You might just have a couple just to take the nerves off there.
That's
Um,
right. Just put the camera on, and whatever
yeah,
happens, happens.
yeah.
You know?
So get surrounded by your 4 kids that you have, and while you're chugging a beer or something.
Right.
But that's our recap for this week. We hope you enjoyed these. Feedback has been kind of low, so let us know anything to improve on or whatsoever. In the next couple of weeks, I am planning on doing some interviews, so be prepared for that. If you want to be interviewed and you haven't, we haven't really kept track, but if you want to be interviewed and haven't been thus far, just let us know and we'll fast track you because we do want to kind of bring that back for this year. But with that, we are done here. Pat, anything else to say?
Nothing. It could potentially be a really sad night with the Orioles
Yeah.
playing. What I strongly feel will be their last game of the year. Adam thinks that they will potentially prolong our agony a couple more games.
I think they're going to win 2 and then lose game 5.
See, it is Dean Kramer on the mound tonight for the Birds. I guess we'll know the results by the time this comes out, but
Yep.
hoping for the best, hoping that Kramer is able to keep his composure. He's a guy that I've noticed this season can get frustrated on the mound rather easily if he's not playing at his best. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's been a fun year. No
Yeah.
Orioles games would potentially mean that I'm not going to be telling Adam we have to be done the podcast by a certain time so we can watch the Birds win. So yeah, no, but we do hope that this is, we do this, we take time out of our, once a night out of our evening.
Yeah.
Adam ignores his kids or tries to for a couple hours here.
Yeah.
We hope that this is fun and good spirited and that it adds something to your fantasy experience. So thanks for
Yeah, we want to make things different, and this is something different that I don't know of any other fantasy league that does this. So we just want to make it special for you all, and we hope you enjoy it. But we will be back next week, and we will see you then. Bye, everyone.
If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify.